last year they went through a frost on Mother's Day, May 8th. And so we lost all the first buds, and actually the grapes looked a lot like these do right now. I don't know if you can see the baby grapes that are forming on here, and these all froze off last year. So at that point, this whole vineyard turned black for about 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden the grape has a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary bud. The secondary bud then came out and we got a crop, but like a 35% crop. If it would have been frosted any harder, and some of the varieties were affected, that we only got a leaf last year. But this was about the stage that they got nailed on because it was so warm in the early spring. The lifespan of a vine is about, well, they tell us they'll live 100 years. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they are like in about 90 years from now. That would make me about 150. You know, we'll see how that goes. And anyway, so once they're established, they tell us also that these grapes are 40 feet down. And so if we have the right varieties for our climate and we get the proper weather conditions, we should have grapes for a long time to come. Of course, each year is different, and because these are what they call the cold hardy varieties, we're learning every day about new things that we didn't know about, because they're in early stages of their life. You know, their life. It's a new industry here in the north. The rest of the vineyard, some of the younger grapes took it a lot harder than these older varieties, because like I said, this variety was planted in '03, so it's what, 8 years old now. So some of the 4-year-old varieties were more damaged than what these were. You just get one production cycle in a year of a grape. So what you see here on these vines is this year's production. And I don't know if you can see that, but the grapes are starting to form on all these flowers. These were what they call their flowers, and then they become grapes. They're just starting to form. And what we'll do, we pruned early this year, and we pruned long because of the damage we had to our grapes last year. So we probably have more grapes on the vines than what maybe we normally would. And so what we'll do this year is go back in and cluster thin. So once they get a little farther along, we'll count the clusters, or roughly the number of clusters on the plant, and we'll reduce that because this is a nice healthy plant. It's strong, but it can only carry so much of a grape load. So what we'll do is reduce the grape load so we get fuller grapes and we don't damage this grape. Stalks that are thinner, for instance, the little one over here, it maybe only could handle 1 cluster of grapes at this point because it's so young, where these can handle 30. And so that's a big difference. Our predator here in the vineyard is fungus. If we lived in a desert, or we watered these a lot, it would not be a problem. But we fight downy mildew, powdery mildew, anthracnose, and black rot are 4 main diseases that these grapes are affected by. We do use some organic chemicals to control these funguses, but we have to use some inorganic chemicals, just depending on what the year is like. If it's a real wet summer like it was last summer, it takes a lot of chemicals to control the fungus your grapes, and if you let the fungus get ahead of you, it just totally destroys the plant. These leaves will get brown spots on them, and it'll totally consume the leaves. We have a little bit of insect problem, but not too much in this vineyard. Toward harvest, our big competitors for the grapes are the raccoons, the squirrels. They've learned to like grapes in our area, so there's probably a dozen squirrels that'll run up and down each trellis, and my dog frankly just got tired of chasing them, so he gave up. So anyway, those are the 2 predators. The yield on grapes, the net gallonage per ton of grapes is about 140 gallons per ton of grapes. These grapes this year should yield between 4 and 5 ton. So that would be about 700 gallons per acre, and it'd be 5 bottles in a gallon. So 3,500 bottles about is what the yield would be in terms of actual wine on an acre of these grapes. Some varieties yield more, some less, and some, depending on our weather conditions, it's all affected. But our winery has a capacity for about 7,500 bottles of wine, so or gallons of wine, which would be about 37,000 bottles of wine. So, and that's probably, this year we'll have a neighbor that's on the other side of our town that planted 1.5 acres of grapes. So that'll give us 12 acres, which should be enough probably to fill our winery up with juice. There are 14 different varieties of grapes in this vineyard, about 7,600 vines. It should make, we blend most everything, although we'll have our first, a grape called Dianna, we will be coming out with just it on its own as a new wine. But generally we'll blend 2 or 3 different grapes to come out with a wine that we think the public will buy. The first grapes in this vineyard will be ready depending on the year, but late August. The last week in August is usually our first harvest of grapes. We do one variety at a time, so we have 14 varieties. So we'll process them in the winery, and then we'll go to the next one. Our winemaker, my daughter-in-law, will continuously check the bricks or the sugar level of the grapes, and when we feel they've optimized in the vineyard, and depending what the condition of the grapes are, like if we feel that the grapes are starting to deteriorate in the vineyard, even though the bricks might not be just perfect, then we'll go ahead and harvest. And that's weather related, environment related, fungus related, you know, that all depends when we pick. So it's kind of a test everyday process. We'll be out here going up and down the rows, and you grab a grape here and you grab a grape there and see what it's like, and then say, let's go with them, and then we do it. Harvest is, we generally use about 5 people because you know it's usually less than an acre, and they can do an acre in a day. You know, everything's picked by hand in 90-pound tubs. The tubs are weighed, it's recorded, and then we chill the grapes for 24 hours before we go ahead and press. So we seem to get better juice production if the grapes are a little bit cooler than coming out of the vineyard. And again, sometimes it's really warm in the fall, sometimes it's chilly. So it just depends on what the condition of those grapes are. I'm still learning. Yeah, you know, I'm a converted dairyman to being a. Well, I'm not a vinologist because I'm a wannabe one probably, but with 11 acres of grapes, you kind of learn really quick, you know, and you really learn by your mistakes. Most farmers learn by their mistakes. You know, we can read about it, we can know about it, but to actually analyze what's going on out here is a different story. But it's fun to see the vineyard develop and age, and what is really exciting is to see the difference in the wine from year to year, because as this vineyard seems to be getting older, the quality of our wine seems to be improving. But it may be from the fact that we know more than we did last year and making the wine too. That could be the reason. So these are some new grapes that we planted this year. We had raspberries in this section, and I couldn't compete with the Canadian thistle, so we decided to put 3 more rows of grapes on. These are called Swenson Whites. The grapes that we buy come from the Finger Lake area of New York. There are some places in Iowa that actually grow them too, but these are well rooted. The root on the grape is about 2 feet long. We take a pulse hole digger, dig a hole down 2.5 feet, drop the grape in, and this grape is about 3 weeks old now in terms of our planting date. It comes as just a stick on top, and this is what you get in 3 weeks. So they're growing well. They've been rained in. We don't water them in. On a real dry year we may, but the subsoil in this is clay and mostly sand. So this is all tiled out. This vineyard's well drained, and grapes have to be well drained. They don't like wet feet. So the plants are 7 foot between plant, in 9-foot wide rows, and it's 640 plants in per acre is what we have. And this grape will be in production in 3 years, so that's how long it takes.
I grew up on a dairy farm. My grandfather built a house in 1911 and founded a farm in Hampton, Iowa, and raised Duroc hogs, and was president of the National Duroc Association for about 25 years, and was very interested in the hogs. And then my father took over the farm, and they got a disease in the hogs, and then he went to dairying. So I grew up on a dairy farm. I did chores before I went to school in the morning, did chores after school, you know, help milk, help feed the calves, whatever was necessary in the dairy farm. So that was my life from, you know, I suppose I started helping at probably 5, 6 years of age, you know, just little chores. And then until I was 18, I probably could have done everything on the farm. And we had that dairy until 2 years ago, and then, you know, the cost of milk was low, and the cost of feed was high, and it was a no-win situation. So he sold his cattle, and we had a young man that rented it last year, and then he also had the same experience. So right now we have just rented the pasture out here to beef cattle, and we have some beef calves out there, and we still have our other farm animals that we normally had, our chickens and our sheep and our goats and all that sort of thing. So, but that's a little bit of the history. It's definitely the wine. And I guess you could say our main product is hospitality, because that's the business we're in. So whether it's a B&B or the winery, you know, hospitality is the most important thing. And my little granddaughter is cute because, you know, instead of a customer coming in the door, she says, "Guests are here, Grandma." So, but wine is our major product that we sell off the farm. First time we made wine was in our basement in some crocks, and it was interesting because our sons were here at Christmas time and they acted very surprised and said, "This is actually pretty good." And one took a case home with him for his New Year's Eve party. But when we planted the grapes, that was the commitment that we would produce it commercially. It's a very expensive process. The trellis, the grapes, the fact that you take care of them for 3 years and have labor involved and equipment involved and all your other chemicals and things that go with the grapes. So, and then the 4th year, you know, you've built your winery and you have your investment in your winery. So you have no return until that 5th year. So once you decide to do it, you're pretty committed. When we first started our bed and breakfast, people were very interested in Iowa products, and the one they kept asking about was wine. And so I called our RC&D man, Kurt Hafe, and I said, "Kurt, what do you know about growing grapes in this area?" And he said, "Well, I know 2 Iowans that are doing it now," and it happened to be Paul Tabor and Ron Mark. And he said, "Let's have a workshop." And I said, "Fine." We had no idea if anyone would come, and actually they turned away about, you know, 50 people. They had 100 people come. Iowa State presented, Paul Tabor presented, and so forth. And then those that were interested, we had a workshop the following year put on by Iowa State and RC&D. And on growing grapes, and that was held at Riceville. The other one was held at the Experimental Research Farm in Nashua. And so that's how we learned, or that was our beginning. I mean, we were really pretty dumb when we started. I mean, like for example, I didn't know you needed to order your grapes a year in advance to get the varieties you wanted, because of course the growers, you know, plant what their orders are asking for with maybe a little extra. So we planted a couple of varieties at the beginning that really didn't pan out for us, and we had to tear them out and plant others. The other thing is I thought it'd be so neat to have all my red grapes together and all my white grapes together. That just sounded like a great organizational plan. Well, it turns out it's much easier if you have red, white, because when you're harvesting then you know exactly, you know, where you are. And the same thing as when you're working with them in the spring, because sometimes you do different kinds of pruning for different varieties. And I think now at this point, having worked with them this long, you know, we know most of the leaves and exactly what grape it is. But when you're first starting out, that's a very steep learning curve. The most challenging part is that we live in an area of a very small population. I think our county's like, you know, 12, 13,000 people. So we have to take the product to the people. You have to take it to the areas where you're going to have a larger population area. So thus we do Farmers Market, Waterloo, Cedar Falls. We're going to do some in Cedar Rapids this year, and so on. And so the urban areas have become really great markets for us. Last year we did the Mason City Farmers Market, but we're in about 6 outlets there. So we really don't want to overkill. You know, we don't want to interfere with the business that's already going to the stores. But that is a huge challenge, is when you start a business in a rural area, You have limited population within easy driving distance. I am always amazed when we go someplace and people say to us, this is our favorite wine. And you know, last night we were we were at the farmers market at University Avenue in Cedar Falls at the Hy-Vee. But we went to, we had to deliver some wine to some Hy-Vee wine and spirits stores. And you walk in there and you see, I don't know what they have, 1,500, 2,000 different kinds of wines in there, you know, California, Australia, other Iowa wines, you know, just wines from all over the world. And you think, you know, how do we, this little farm in Iowa, compete with that? You know, it's just kind of overwhelming that we are. And then we went go to the farmer's market, and of course it was raining and cold last night, and it was the first one, and there weren't very many people. But this one lady walks by and says, oh, your wine's my daughter's favorite wine. And we said, where does she live? And she said, Mason City. And then another man walks by and he goes, we only drink your wine. And you know, it's just overwhelming to think. So that's been really successful for us. The other thing is that our daughter-in-law is our winemaker, and she can taste. And you know, I mean, she's a microbiology, so she has the science background, but she also has the art of it. And she can taste wine and do incredible things with it. So that's been a real help to us. Well, I think that they're going to continue to be very successful. I think the most important thing is that we, you know, there's two different kinds of Iowa wineries. There's one, for us, we want to have all estate wines, and currently we do. Had a frost last year, so this year they won't be all quite, you know, they'll be close to all estate wines. Many wineries are, you know, importing juice and making wine, and so, you know, you'll see some Merlot and so forth that Iowa wineries are putting out. That just simply means they bought the juice and they're making wine, which is fine. That's everybody's choice. Our choice is that we are dedicated to producing the grapes and making wine from our own grapes.